The silent priority alert came through at 2:47 in the afternoon. I was sitting in a classified briefing room 300 miles away in Washington, D.C., watching satellite thermal feeds of a money laundering operation in Bogota. My phone didn't ring or vibrate. It just flashed a single red notification. Perimeter breach. Sector 4. Home office. I didn't panic. I didn't gasp. I simply excused myself from the table, stepped into the corridor, and pulled up the secure feed on my phone. The image quality was military-grade crystal clear. Standing in the center of my Manhattan penthouse living room wasn't a burglar in a ski mask. It was my sister Chloe. She was wearing a white designer dress, holding a thermal cutting tool I recognized immediately. It was an industrial-grade device, something you buy on the dark web if you want to melt through a biometric lock without triggering a heat alarm. She walked straight to my office, safe the one hidden behind a false panel in the wall. She didn't hesitate. She pressed the tool against the lock mechanism, waited 4 seconds for the magnesium coil to burn through the steel pins, and pulled the door open. She reached inside and grabbed the only thing in there. A heavy, brushed metal drive about the size of a deck of cards. To her, it looked like a high-end cryptocurrency wallet. She held it up to the camera, smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and mouthed 2 words. "Found it." Then she turned and walked out. She didn't know she had just triggered a silent federal warrant. She didn't know that the device she was holding wasn't a wallet, it was a ledger. And she had just walked out of a Faraday cage with active evidence in a federal RICO case. I tapped the screen once to activate Protocol 0. Then I walked back into the briefing room to grab my jacket. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from right now. I'd love to know who is part of our community of silent warriors. I didn't call her. I didn't text my parents. I simply walked down to the garage, got into my government-issued black SUV, and started the drive north toward the Hamptons. Chloe's engagement party was starting in 3 hours. The GPS estimated I'd arrive right as they were serving the champagne. As I merged onto the highway, I initiated a silent tag on the drive. A small red dot appeared on my dashboard map, moving steadily east on the Long Island Expressway. She was bringing the evidence directly to the party. Driving has always been when I do my best thinking. The hum of the tires on the asphalt, the sterile interior of the car, it centers me. To my family, I was Grace, the boring IT consultant, the one who fixed their Wi-Fi and stared at spreadsheets all day. They didn't know about the badge in my glove box. They didn't know that my boring consulting trips were actually extraction operations or forensic audits of cartel banks. They saw what they wanted to see. A quiet, plain woman in sensible shoes who didn't have Chloe's sparkle or charisma. But silence isn't weakness, it's training. I learned that a long time ago. When you grow up as the invisible child, the one who is always overlooked in favor of the golden sibling, you learn to blend into the walls. You learn to watch. You learn that if you don't make a sound, people will reveal who they really are right in front of you because they don't think you're important enough to hide from. I spent 18 years perfecting the art of being a ghost in my own home. I learned how to walk without creaking the floorboards, how to listen to conversations through closed doors, how to read the micro-expressions that betrayed a lie before it was even spoken. The Secret Service just refined what my family had already taught me. They taught me how to weaponize that invisibility, how to be the person in the room that nobody remembers, so you can be the one who sees everything. My family thought my silence was submission. They didn't realize it was surveillance. I checked the tracker again. The dot had stopped moving. It was parked at the estate in East Hampton, my parents' summer house, the venue for tonight's festivities. I could picture the scene perfectly. White tents on the lawn, an open bar serving vintage champagne, my mother Angela fluttering around in pastels, making sure every napkin was folded just so. My father Richard holding court with his scotch, talking loudly about market trends he didn't understand. And Chloe, the star of the show, glowing in the center of it all, probably telling everyone how she'd saved the day by finding the funds for the deposit. They had no idea what was coming down the driveway. I called my deputy director. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't ask for help. I gave a situation report. Asset compromised. Location confirmed. Requesting tactical intercept. Authorization code, Delta 9. His voice was calm, professional. Tactical team is mobilizing from the New York field office. ETA 40 minutes. Do not engage until perimeter is secure. I hung up. I wasn't driving to a party anymore. I was driving to a crime scene. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the ghost. I was going to be the haunting. I pulled up to the gate exactly 45 minutes later. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. I could hear the faint sound of a string quartet playing something classical and expensive. The valet looked at my SUV with confusion. It wasn't the usual luxury sedan or sports car. It was covered in road dust and looked like a tank. I ignored him, parked it myself on the grass, and stepped out. I smoothed my blazer, checked the concealed carry holster at my hip to make sure it wasn't printing, and walked toward the white tent. The air smelled of expensive perfume, sea salt, and the distinct rotting sweetness of entitlement. My mother spotted me first. She didn't smile. Her eyes flicked up and down my outfit, black trousers, black blazer, white shirt, and narrowed. She walked over not to greet me but to intercept me. "Grace," she hissed, keeping her voice low so the guests wouldn't hear. "You're late, and look at you. You look like you're going to a funeral, not your sister's engagement party. Couldn't you have worn something festive just for once?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the tension around her eyes, the way her hands fluttered nervously. She knew. She knew Chloe had stolen the drive. She just didn't care. "I'm here now, Mother," I said, my voice flat. "Where is Chloe?" "She's busy being the bride-to-be," my mother snapped. "Don't bother her. And try to smile. People are watching." She shoved a glass of champagne into my hand and turned back to a group of women instantly switching on her charm. I watched her go. I took a sip of the champagne. It was warm. I set the glass down on a passing tray and scanned the room. There she was. Chloe. She was standing by the head table, laughing at something her fiancé Tyler had said. She looked radiant. She looked victorious. And right there, sitting on the table next to her clutch, was the drive. It wasn't even hidden. She had it out like a trophy. I felt a cold, hard knot of anger tighten in my chest. Not because she stole from me, but because she was so arrogant, so sure of her immunity that she didn't even think she needed to hide the evidence. I started walking toward her. My father intercepted me next. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder, his breath smelling of scotch. "Grace, you made it." He didn't sound happy. He sounded relieved, like a problem had been managed. "Listen, your mother tells me you might be upset about the borrowing. We'll talk about it later, all right? Don't make a scene. It's family money anyway. We all pitch in." The borrowing. That was their word for it. Not theft, not breaking and entering. Borrowing. I looked at my father's red, sweating face and realized the true horror of their psychology. They didn't see me as a separate person. To them, I was just an extension of the family organism. My apartment was their apartment. My money was their money. My boundaries were just suggestions they could override whenever the golden child needed something. This is what psychologists call enmeshment. It's a form of narcissistic control where the individual identities of family members are erased to serve the needs of the dominant parent or the favored child. In their minds, they hadn't robbed me. They had just reallocated assets from the storage unit me to the showroom Chloe. They felt entitled to my resources because they viewed me not as a human being with rights but as a utility. A faucet they could turn on whenever they were thirsty. And the terrifying part, they genuinely believed they were the good guys. They thought they were helping me by giving my useless savings a purpose. By giving it to Chloe. I gently removed my father's hand from my shoulder. I didn't say a word. I just kept walking. I reached the head table just as the music died down. Chloe tapped a spoon against her glass. The crowd went quiet. She beamed at them, raising her glass. "Thank you all for coming," she announced, her voice tinkling like a bell. "I know there were some rumors that we might have to change venues last minute due to some deposit issues." She giggled, and a few people chuckled politely. "But I am so happy to say that thanks to a generous, unexpected contribution from my wonderful sister Grace, we were able to secure this dream location." The room erupted in applause. Everyone turned to look at me, smiling, nodding, thinking I was the benevolent benefactor, the good sister. Chloe blew me a kiss. My mother beamed at me from the front row, mouthing, "See, it's fine." I stood there, the focal point of 100 lies, The applause washed over me like static. I looked at the drive on the table. I looked at the satellite feed on my phone, which showed 6 tactical units moving into position around the perimeter of the garden. The red dots were closing in. I didn't smile back. I didn't wave. I walked up to the table, reached past the flowers, and picked up the drive. The room went dead silent. Chloe's smile faltered. "What are you doing, Grace?" she hissed through her teeth. "Put that back." I turned to face the crowd. I held up the drive. It caught the light, heavy and cold and metallic. "This isn't a contribution," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried to the back of the tent. I didn't engage my diaphragm. I engaged my command voice. The voice I used when I was briefing the Joint Chiefs. The voice that didn't ask for attention but demanded compliance. "This is federal evidence," I said. "And you have exactly 10 seconds to explain why you removed it from a secured facility before the people outside come in here and ask you themselves." Chloe laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. "Oh my God, Grace. You're so dramatic. It's just a Bitcoin wallet. Mom said it was just old crypto stuff you weren't using. Stop trying to ruin my night." I placed my phone on the table next to the cake. I tapped the screen to mirror the display onto the large monitors that had been set up for the slideshow. Suddenly, the photos of Chloe and Tyler as children disappeared. They were replaced by a live thermal feed of the estate we were sitting in. The guests gasped. You could see the heat signatures of the guests in the tent, warm clusters of red and orange. But around the edges, moving through the hedges, moving toward the tent flaps, were cold blue shapes. Uniform shapes, moving with precision. "That's not a Bitcoin wallet, Chloe," I said. "That drive contains the decryption keys for the Sinaloa cartel's North American laundering network. It was seized in a raid 3 days ago. It is currently the single most tracked object on the eastern seaboard." The color drained from her face. My parents stood up, knocking over their chairs. Richard was shouting now. "Grace, turn that off. What the hell is wrong with you? You're scaring people." I ignored him. I looked straight at my sister. "By taking this drive out of a Faraday cage and bringing it here, you didn't just steal from me. You broadcasted a homing signal to the U.S. government, and potentially to the cartel associates who are currently looking for this hardware. You haven't just committed grand larceny, Chloe. You've committed terrorism financing and obstruction of a federal investigation." The air left the room. It was a vacuum. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The reality of what I was saying slammed into them. This wasn't a family squabble. This wasn't drama. This was real. "But we just wanted the money," Chloe whispered. Her voice was trembling. Mom said you wouldn't mind." I looked at my mother. She was clutching her pearls, staring at me with pure hatred. "You did this," she spat. "You brought this danger into our house. You set her up." I shook my head. "No, Mother. I didn't set her up. I just stopped protecting her from reality. And reality has a way of crashing the party." I tapped my earpiece. A gesture none of them had ever seen me do. "Protocol 0 is active. Suspect is in custody of the asset. Proceed." The lights in the tent cut out. For a second there was total darkness, then the sound of flashbangs detonating in the garden. Boom, boom, boom. White light flooded the tent, blinding and disorienting. Guests screamed and dropped to the floor. The canvas walls of the tent were sliced open. Tactical teams in full-body armor poured in laser sights, cutting through the smoke. Federal agents, get down, get down. It was chaos. Expensive crystals shattered. Tables were overturned. People were scrambling, crawling under tablecloths, sobbing. I stood still. My hands were visible, held away from my body. I was the only person in the room who wasn't panicking. I watched my father, the man who had ruled our family with an iron fist of disapproval, cower under the buffet table, covering his head with a linen napkin. Agents swarmed the head table. Chloe tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. She scrambled backward, tripping over her train, and tried to shove the drive into a floral arrangement. A tactical officer tackled her. The image was visceral. The influencer in her $5,000 engagement dress, face pressed into the grass, zip ties being cinched around her wrists. "Get off her," my mother screamed, trying to pull the officer away. "That's my daughter, you can't do this." "Do you know who we are?" Another agent grabbed my mother and forced her back. "Ma'am, step back or you will be detained." The lead agent walked into the center of the tent. Agent Miller. I knew him well. We had worked the Bogota case together. He saw me standing there. He didn't smile. He walked over his rifle, lowered but ready. Agent, he said, nodding to me. Situation report. I pointed at Chloe, who was now being hauled to her feet, grass stains on her white dress, mascara running down her face. Suspect in possession of stolen federal evidence, I said. My voice was devoid of emotion, no anger, no pity, just the facts. The chain of custody has been broken. The asset needs to be secured immediately. Chloe looked at me. Her eyes were wide, terrified, pleading. Grace, please, tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I'm your sister. I looked at her. I looked at my parents, who were watching me with a mixture of horror and expectation, waiting for me to fix it. Waiting for me to be the invisible fix-it girl one last time. I looked back at Agent Miller. I don't have a sister, I said. Process her. They dragged her away. The screaming didn't stop until they closed the doors of the armored van. The aftermath was a slow-motion car crash. The engagement was called off the next morning. Tyler released a statement distancing himself from the criminal activities of his former fiancée. The influencer brand Chloe had spent 5 years building became toxic overnight. Sponsorships were pulled. Her accounts were flooded with comments not of admiration but of schadenfreude. My parents were indicted for conspiracy. The text messages on Chloe's phone were damning. They hadn't just known about the theft, they had encouraged it. They had texted her the layout of my apartment. They had told her to take whatever you find. Grace won't do anything. They were facing 5 to 10 years. The estate in the Hamptons was seized by the state for asset forfeiture investigations. I didn't visit them. I didn't go to the arraignment. I was promoted 3 weeks later. My clearance was raised to the highest level for recovering the asset and dismantling the domestic arm of the laundering network. I went back to the empty family home one last time before the state put the locks on. It was silent. The furniture was gone. The memories were just dust motes dancing in the light. I stood in the living room where I had spent so many years trying to be good, trying to be quiet, trying to be worthy of love that was never going to come. I left my key on the counter. I drove back to the city. That night, sitting in my penthouse, I received a letter. It was from the Federal Detention Center. Chloe's handwriting. I didn't open it. I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and watched the envelope curl into black ash. I realized then that I hadn't just survived. I had evolved. I was no longer the boring sister. I was the one who was left standing. You cannot save someone who is addicted to their own destruction. That's the final lesson. If I had tried to save her, if I had covered for her one more time, I would have become an accessory to her crimes. I would have lost my career, my freedom, and my self-respect. I would have burned down my own life to keep her warm for another 10 minutes. Sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about letting go of the rope before you get pulled over the cliff. Have you ever had to let someone hit rock bottom because you knew saving them would destroy you? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if you want to see more stories of justice served cold, make sure to follow.